And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to this. It should be impromptu because we've done no preparation. Show on world building. We have not one but two distinguished authors with us. Um, James, tell us who you are, why you're here, and show us one of each of your books because that'll fill up a good 30 minutes.
I am James Maxey. I am the author of about 30 books, but the one that changed my life was this one. This is what it looked like when it originally came out through the publisher. It went through 4 printings with Solaris Books. Uh, when I got the rights back, and Indie published it. I had some BookBub deals where I was giving that away for free and had like 70,000 downloads. The
Wow.
free version, and then just even today when I'm at shows, the number of people come up. It's like, oh, you're the guy who wrote Bitterwood. It's basically why I was able to quit my day job. I have also written, sorry, I will go ahead and grab this, a series called Dragon Apocalypse. This is the omnibus of that. This is something I also published through Solaris. It was a trilogy with them, and I added a 4th book. So dragons are what I'm most known for, but I'm a prolific short story writer. So I've got 4 collections of short stories. I've got a pen name now, VexJMA, where I'm writing some spicy material, and that's actually turned out to be a very, very smart business move on my end. And then I edit some kids' books, and I've got some superhero novels. So just all over the board for what I write.
And James, you have to mention what award did you win this year?
So I'm kind of in this weird quantum state of not talking about it yet. So
Oh, okay. Okay, never mind.
it was supposed to be announced by now, and apparently in foreign markets they've gotten the magazine where the award is announced, because I've had it mentioned on Twitter for people who are overseas are like, oh, the winner of this award is so and so. But here in the US, they haven't. Their last issue was supposed to come out. The issue with the award winners was supposed to come out on like October 8th, and here it is. Getting close to Thanksgiving, and I keep going to Barnes and Noble, and it just does that issue has not shown up. And on Facebook, it looks like they have locked their comments down for the magazine, and some of the last comments were, "Hey, where is this issue?" So it is just my luck that at the time when I've won an award, that the magazine that it was supposed to be announced in, could be like, collapsing. They were sold earlier this year. Several of the biggest fiction magazines for science fiction were sold to a new publisher, and there's apparently been some controversy with clauses in the new contracts, and some very prominent authors have been withdrawing stories from these magazines. So I'm wondering if they had an issue going to press, and had an author was like, no, you can't publish the story, that's your cover story or something. But again, I just don't know. So officially,
Right.
I'm not supposed to talk about it, but I will say, I can say that I'm a finalist for the Asimov's Readers Award for Best Short Story.
I was going to say yes. It's an astounding
Yeah.
award.
Yeah.
So anyway, Dave, you have a few books too, don't you?
Yeah, I've got most of them back here.
And you've won a couple. You've won at least one competition that I know of.
Yeah, I won the third SPSFC. That was for Kenai here, which is sci-fi, and I really love the indie competitions. I've been in SPSFC twice, and SPFBO probably 4 times. and they're just tons of fun, and the community around them is great too. I write all kinds of stuff. I write sci-fi and fantasy, and I've written 3 contemporary mysteries. And I am actually working on a romance novel with a friend now. She's writing the female part, and I'm writing the male part, and we alternate chapters. So that's yet another genre that I'm flailing around with. So that's fun. Yeah.
So you've written all these books, and you're like, and now I want money, so I'm writing romance.
No, I've been. She was a professor at the college where I taught, and we were good friends there. And we have this little 2-person literary society. We meet for cheesecake once a month, and we thought this might be fun. So it's been a blast. She likes the enemies to lovers kind of plot line. And so she wrote the first chapter and made my guy this like complete tool that I then had to try to rehabilitate as the book went on. So anyway, yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So yeah, and you have your stack of books behind you. You've written 10, 11 books, something like that?
I've written 11. One's a traditionally published children's book about endangered species. And then I've written a 4-book series about fantasy detectives, my Inquisitors Guild series. And then I wrote The Glorious and Epic Tale of Lady Isovar, which is a really silly fantasy book. And then the 2 sci-fi, Daros and Kenai, both sort of space opera, far future, humans have colonized the stars kind of thing.
And not only that, but you've also published a game, right?
Oh, you hear that?
Several?
Yeah, I've done 4 of those. These little puzzle card games, Dr. Extra's Notebook. They're kind of like an escape room in a deck of cards. And I started publishing those in 2019, and have got 4 of them out now, including one on a Kickstarter. So that's been really cool too.
What's the Kickstarter address, or what can people go to? What can they search?
Long over, but yeah, if you go to planktongames.com is my game company, so you could go there and check those out if you want. I got my start doing indie stuff really early, like back in 1996 or so. I published some computer shareware games. So Snood is the biggest one of those. That was pretty big back in the 90s and 2000s. So yeah, whenever I've had the chance to try to sell stuff to a business, I've always decided to fumble around on my own. So that's how my literary career is going to.
Well, it sounds like it's going stronger than a lot of ours. So
no, I don't know about that.
Also have to mention that, Dave, what do you do in your spare time in the evenings?
Oh, yeah, you went to a show there. Yeah, I do improv comedy. Have coming up on 20 years this January, so that's just a ton of fun.
When's the Netflix special?
What's that? I don't think we're quite that big yet, but we should work on it.
Yeah, it's all about putting out TikTok videos of your stand-up.
Yeah. Well, we're on Twitch now as of this year. They've started filming even the rehearsals. So yeah, if you go to the Idiot Box Twitch channel, you can see me some nights.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey, I think a good way to start off this conversation about world building is to ask our new question, and then after that, I do have a couple of follow-ups. But so, gentlemen, does the character of Tom Bombadil make Tolkien's world better or worse?
I feel like you have a preferred answer for this.
Well, no, I mean, it's just that's the question we ask.
Okay.
I will say that it is entirely up to the individual reader.
This is the thing about world building, guys. Come on.
Yeah, no. I mean, it is not for me. There's a lot. I'm not an author who holds up Tolkien as the apex, be all, end all of fantasy fiction. There's just a lot of stuff that I personally, find a little dry. I like the stabbing. in fiction. I like the stabbing. I like holding your dying comrade in your arm and shaking your fist at the sky while lightning crackles around you and vowing your revenge, even if you have to chase them into the deepest bowels of hell. And then I will worry about later about what hell means in this reality.
And you think that's better than dancing around the woods with your hot wife singing poetry? Is that what I'm hearing? So you asked if the existence of Tom Bombadil makes the world better, which is a different question than does it make the book better? Because
usually we ask make the book better.
But I think having Tom Bombadil in there and Goldberry, I think it does add another dimension to like old power and legends in the world. And so I think, that's kind of what Tolkien was good at, was coming up with weird stuff to stick in all the different areas and then write, 50 pages of unreadable poetry about it. But yeah, I think having Tom out there is sort of a wild card, and, he's a little Deus Ex Machina or whatever to find him in the barrows and bring him back to life when they should be dead. But I don't know. I think having him in the world is pretty cool. I'll go with yes.
So here's, but again, I hate to be ambiguous, but there are people who live for this, that they are, if you're writing fantasy, if you're writing science fiction, any sort of speculative genre, eventually you're going to have to come to deal with the fact that you are a nerd, and there are people out there that are even bigger nerds. And so, I wind up having conversations all the time with people who are so deeply into lore and, just the fine details of the world building. And it's meaningful to them. And I respect that, I respect the hardcore Trekkies who, when I used to work, ages ago, third shift at a Kinko's, there was like a Trekkie crew that would come in and be photocopying the blueprints for the various starships, and were always needing help with the copiers because they were doing the interstellar navigation, but we're having trouble figuring out how to make something 50% darker.
Speaking of which, if I can interject real quick, for the true nerds out there, next Friday, Black Friday, Lego is releasing finally, for the first time, a Star Trek ship, the USS Enterprise D. So, if you want that, next Friday is when that becomes available. First time ever for Star Trek with Lego. Okay, sorry.
And
I'm going to go whole nerd.
I'm just going to interject. You can see that these two are much more polished than me because my answer is no, it's crap. Take it out. Tolkien needs a better editor. But then, I'm not subtle.
Obviously, you want to take it out of the book. They took it out of the movie. That was a great decision. But having it in the world is kind of interesting. It makes the world have more to do.
And a lot of it comes down to what you think a novel is and what the purpose of a novel is. So Tolkien, his world building would be perfectly at home in Tolstoy or Melville, who had no trouble just transitioning into, a full-blown essay. Victor Hugo, with 600 pages on the sewers of Paris, in the middle of the plot, so it's an older approach to the novel where you really want to write a very long essay about something, but to get it into the public, get the public to read it, you attach a plot around it.
To be fair, though, all of those things you just mentioned, all those books came out when people didn't have television and movies
right.
and everything else, right? So you had the time to read and to really kind of get absorbed into that world. So things like Tom Bombadil, plus it broke up the walking, which was good because there was a lot of walking in Lord of the Rings.
And so something like Moby Dick, I tell people, if you read it thinking that you're reading a novel, you'll get frustrated. But if you go into it and realize I am reading a collection of fictional nonfiction essays about a whale, written from the point of view of a character that isn't quite Melville, but plainly has a lot more education than a typical sailor should have. And then if you just read it as this collection of essays that is bookended by a novel, then it's actually a pretty fascinating work of history and science. The debate about whether a whale is a fish or a mammal is really kind of fascinating from that moment in time when it was written, before when the science was still a tiny bit in flux.
See, they should put that in the right on the frontispiece page. It's like, read this like it's a series of essays instead.
Yeah.
And people might be more inclined to read it that way. I've never read Moby Dick, actually. I don't think I was ever tasked with that.
Man.
Huh?
Yeah. My experience was that like the chapters kind of alternated between this sort of whaling story, and then it was, now I'm going to tell you everything about harpoons.
Yeah.
And if you had taken the book and taken out the story parts and put them together, or taken out the whaling parts and put them together, you would have had two interesting books. And putting them together works fine if you have a lot of time and don't have to write a paper on it at the end.
Well, the trip out to the boat museum or whatever, he took off on his taxes as a business expense, so he needed to put something in the book about it. That's what Mike does, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, for those who may not know, I don't know if we mentioned it, Dave, you are a retired geology professor, right?
Yes, not strictly retired, but I don't do that anymore. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, I'm a professor emeritus, is what they say, and that sounds way fancier than what you said.
People say either you must be really smart or you must be really old.
Yeah, I know.
So how do you build a world, Dave? You, the geologist.
Well, it depends on whether you're talking about the physical world or the cultural stuff and the magic and all that kind of thing. But for me, my planets, whether it's a fantasy world or a sci-fi world, have to make geologic sense. They have to have some kind of tectonics. I have to know how wet or dry they are. If they're going to have people living on them, then they've got to be close to what people can tolerate here in terms of gravity and everything. So I always start from that sort of place, and because I have spent some time studying climate and rocks and mountain building and all that kind of thing, then usually I try to make all of that work. I don't usually draw maps or anything like that to set the stage. I know a lot of people do that kind of thing, but yeah, no, I for me, there's just a whole bunch of things I wouldn't do that sort of constrain it. And when I read other books and I see giant volcanoes popping out of the ground really fast, or a bridge built over lava or something like that, I'm like, no. And so, yeah, I think it's less that I use it for what I am going to do, and more that I use it for what I am never going to do.
You don't like bridges built over lava?
Well, that seems.
I don't have a problem with the bridges built over lava. What I have a problem with is the fact that they made them so narrow, and there's not and that same problem with Star Wars, right? Who builds these things without guardrails?
Yeah. No, there's an episode of The Mandalorian where they're on a boat sailing around in lava, and I'm like, oh, you're all dead. I know you're all dead. Why are you? Yeah. Anyway.
So not. Can we deduce from this then that you are not a big Terry Pratchett fan with the elephant on the back of a turtle kind of?
If you're going into mythology and you're treating the mythology as real, then you can really do whatever you want and have your planet shaped that way. But for me, if I'm going to do something weird like that, or if I'm going to put, like in the Lady Isobar book, I have one of the guys, and he's doing actually magic based on crystals. Like there are regular minerals, and then there are minerals that have magical properties, and he's using things like the magnetic axis of the rocks that contain iron. He's aligning them and magically getting them focused that way. So I try to use the stuff that I know that's kind of cool to build it into how the world works and where people go. I often will put my field trip stops as scenes in my book. So places that I dragged a bunch of tired and bored students out to, that'll be a place that my heroes run through on their way as they flee the city or something like that. So
just to torment your students, right?
What's that?
Just to torment your students if they're like, I want to see what he's doing now.
No,
I remember that.
Yeah, we had a place called the Dead Dog Locality, which was one of my favorite stops because a lot of these places out in the mountains, there's not a lot of trash collection, so people will just dump stuff wherever there's a flat spot in the road, which is also where you go to do geology because then you can see what's around you. And so there was one place where there was always like 5 or 6 dead animals in there. And I remember telling one student that she was standing in a deer and she looked down and was like, "Ah!" and hopped out of the deer. So, yeah. So anyway, I borrow from the geology itself and from my experience teaching it to try to give some sort of reality to that.
So I am very much, like you, Dave, I want to have my planets make sense. And this second Proxima book, Jungle Planet, that Ro is editing, one of the guys I work with got a degree in meteorology, and I'm like, okay, it's tidally locked, but I want it to still be habitable, so therefore most of it's water with 2 continents facing the sun, and this is that, you get convection currents, and I'm like, what about this? And he just goes, Mike, there's a reason I don't do meteorology. I'm not that into it. Shut up. And I'm like, but come on. So,
and for anybody who's wondering, Mike's book doesn't go into all of that nonsense. It's actually kind of readable.
Yeah, I got to know what it is, and then I just kind of gloss over it. And if you ever ask me a question at a Comic-Con, I'll be like, well, you're stuck for 30 minutes. Let me tell you.
Well, there's some things that you can get that are pretty basic, and once you sort of understand them, you understand a lot more about how Earth works too. So, like if you look at climate, we have strips of desert or dry areas, and we have strips of humid areas. Like the equator, it has a lot of rainfall. It's very humid. If you go 30 degrees north and south latitude, you're in deserts in both directions. And then if you go to about 60 degrees, it's wet. You're in like Seattle and the rainier parts of the northern hemisphere. And then the poles are basically dry. And all of that happens because of atmospheric circulation and Hadley cells. And every planet you ever go to is going to have Hadley cells, which means that every planet is going to have these sort of sideways bands of climate zones. And even Jupiter has Hadley cells, and it doesn't even have a surface.
I'm glad you said that. Look at the shirt I'm wearing.
Yeah, those stripes on your shirt are the Hadley cells on Jupiter. And so every planet you go to is going to have east-west bands of wet and dry, where you have, wet is where the air is going up, dry is where it's coming down. So if you understand a little bit about how that works and what parts of it are universal, then you can kind of add that to every planet. Same thing works with plate tectonics. We understand a little bit more about how that works. And if you try to imagine the world that didn't have plate tectonics, it's going to be a lot different. You're talking something more like Mars or maybe Dune or something like that. And you're very rapidly not going to have mountains on it. It's all going to be kind of dirt and flat. And, and so yeah, just understanding a little bit of geology, even a first year.
Wait, did you say that you wouldn't have mountains if you didn't have plate tectonics? Because there's some pretty impressive mountains on Mars.
Yeah, Mars used to have plate tectonics, but doesn't anymore. And so it's in the process of at least most people think it doesn't anymore. I don't know. I'm retired. But no, it has some mountains from prior tectonics. But the other thing is that Mars is a smaller planet than we are. And so it's cooled off more than we have because it has more surface area compared to its volume. And the interior is where the radioactive decay is happening, keeping it hot. And so it's cooled off enough that its surface is stopped largely flowing around and doing the kinds of things that our surface has and that Venus's surface does, just because it's smaller. And so once you understand kind of how that stuff works, you can work it into your books to make realistic worlds, at least to the people who care about that kind of thing.
So Dave, question for you. If you're reading a book and they have a river that flows uphill, are you continuing to read this book, or are you just like, no, I'm done, peace out?
Well, if they just say that without any explanation, then I'm a little bummed. I remember a D&D campaign I was in where we were exploring and we got to this flooded cave, and at the back of the flooded cave there was a kind of a shaft that went down, and we got down to the room underneath the flooded cave and it wasn't flooded, and I was like, no, it's going to be flooded, why? And so that totally broke the reality for me, because
I see I can think of like 50 different scenarios too.
Yeah, no, I mean you could make it
waterfalls going the wrong way,
magic, or some sort of alteration of the rocks, I suppose, but it was anyway. So there's sometimes where I'm never like throw the book at the wall, kind of I won't read this anymore, but I do start to be like, okay, well, that's frustrating. I have a whole lot of trouble with like disaster movies that do that wrong too. Like the ones where the faults always split the earth into giant chasms, like that's not how earthquakes typically happen. Or like people standing in a room shouting out increasing Richter magnitudes, like that doesn't happen. There's one Richter magnitude. It's the magnitude of the P wave when it first arrives. But these people are like, 7.4. Oh my God, 7.8. And it's like, no, you would get one wave. You wouldn't be. Yeah. Anyway, so there's some stuff that you get frustrated with.
Oh, I am so happy for the show. And Dave, I have to say, I'm thrilled with myself, patting myself on the back, because my planet that's very small, it's tidally locked. It has no mountains on it because it has no plate tectonics.
Well, if you have tides, they can make their own volcanoes. Like some of the moons of Jupiter have enough gravity going on that they stay molten just from tidal friction. So that's a different way to get to your mountain. But it sounds like you're thinking about it hard, which is all that anyone can really have.
I really did. Way more than I needed to. So the quote by Brandon Sanderson is that your story, you want it to be like the iceberg, just like 10% you're going to talk about, and he goes, but you don't want 90% that's submerged. You want the illusion that there's 90% more information that is submerged. You don't want to spend all that time doing that. So I kind of fail at that. I kind of do a lot more of the underneath stuff. But then, honestly,
you're not giving us 40 pages of dwarven poetry, though. That's to your credit.
Well, at the same time, though, he doesn't find people with his language tattooed on their arm. So
that's true.
So I think for me, so I agree. I think Brandon Sanderson is I think that was a very wise quote. There's a lot of stuff I'll put into my books where I'll mention something that some historical event that I haven't thought about. It's really just tossed in as a as a placeholder, and then sometimes I'll go back and develop it out. But if as long as you're creating the illusion that you've thought about it, and then it's amazing how much your readers will just start filling in stuff, so they will, I've added stuff to my world because readers contacted me with questions or theories, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I can work with that. You had mentioned Discworld, and so I have a couple of different approaches to world building. So for Bitterwood, it's a post-apocalyptic America, and so I, for the most part, stick with what we know about geology and weather and biology and physics. My dragons don't breathe fire. They're limited in size. They're not airplanes. They can't just hop in the air and fly 600 miles and in 2 hours. They burn calories to get off the ground, and so so I work hard to make them biologically plausible. Uh, but then for my next series, Dragon Apocalypse, I was like, well, science is completely inapplicable here. It's a fictional world, it follows fictional rules, and the characters, there's characters within it that know that it's a fictional world and can rewrite the fiction from inside. Uh, and this is basically how magic works. Yeah, that's the Dragon Apocalypse, and it's fun with the Dragon Apocalypse. I will say things that are just counterfactual to our reality, but then provide like the evidence. So in the Dragon Apocalypse world, the sun is cold, and one of the characters is like, "You're crazy." I look at the sun, and my face feels warm. It's obviously a source of warmth. And they're like, no, because it's cold, heat flows towards it, so you feel your face feels warm because the heat within you is flowing towards the sun. Heat flows towards cold, and they're like, you just don't know what you're talking about. It says, no, the best scholars have studied this. They have devices that can determine temperature, and they go up on the mountaintop where you're close to the sun, and it's cold there. And then you go into mine shafts far underground, and it's hot. And so plainly, it is not the sun that makes stuff hot. The sun is cold. And so I really enjoy, working out the logic of these fictional counterfactual universes. So they, when they are fighting, in the presence of the sun, they're jumping around on ice floes that we look up at the starry sky and see stars, and it's up there. It's just giant ice floes in the great sea above.
So if she weighs the same as a duck,
Yeah. Yeah, but
that's a good point, because it's a lot of it is how you present it, because there's something awesome about having a world where the rules aren't the same as ours.
Yes.
And I do that in Kenai, and I don't want to spoil it, but there's a very big difference about what's happening on Kenai than the rest of the world. But like, if you think about what's the Pacific Rim, the movie with the robots that are coming out of the bottom of the ocean, right? I saw that movie and I'm like, this is awesome. I love this, even though, how do the robots get there? Who cares? But if I watch The Meg, I love The Meg until they try to explain how the shark has survived, in little pockets of thermal barrier. And I'm like, no, that's bullshit. Never would have happened, And so if you're making an assertion that science just works this way, that's a different thing than making an assertion that my world works this way. And as long as you're careful about separating what you're asserting reality to be versus what are the rules for your particular place, I think you're okay. And I think you can do a lot of really cool stuff with your imagination in the worlds that aren't the same as ours.
And so for me, here was the liberating thing. So there are, I've gotten grief from people who know stuff.
Yeah.
Early on, in Bitterwood, they were like, "Oh, you're riding these, you have these." They rode these horses for 80 miles. That's, the horse would die, if you rode a horse continuously that far. You do these swapping out the horses, and so I was making some, some basically, treating the horse as a motorcycle, basically, making some basic mistake, and people caught that and were on top of that. On the other hand, I just don't forget that people find it 100% plausible that, if you see your parents get gunned down in an alley and you're a billionaire, the wisest course of action will be to to put on underwear and throw boomerangs at the mentally ill. And
We
they're
all process our grief in different ways, you know.
yeah.
Right, you go to Tibet for 5 years.
If you're born on a planet with a red sun and you travel to a planet with a yellow sun, of course, science says you will gain the superpowers. One of my favorite Golden Age comics, I had like a coverless version of like Superman 13, and they had like a 1-page graphic of how his powers work. And it's like, because he came from a heavier planet, his muscles are denser, and so now, in our world, he's powerful. So that was science based, and we're like, he can absorb energy from the sun the way that we absorb vitamin D from the sun, which isn't quite scientific, quite what happens, but it was still like, they're really making a good
But they put him in New York City and made him work in a building. Why not put him in Phoenix?
Maybe he just has a closet full of grow lights. He goes in there at the end of the day.
That's right.
Yeah. My theory is I'm hijacking this, taking away from the world building, but my theory is that that the best writers are aware that Superman, is Clark Kent, and that he is a reporter, not because this is Superman's disguise so we can find out what to fight. He's a reporter because he actually believes in things like a free press and information and truth and justice, and he feels like this is how he's going to do it. And the Superman stuff is just a distraction, away from his normal duties of reporting on a zoning committee or a banking regulation, which is how civilization is advanced, versus the fighting the giant robots. That's just that's just bullshit that he has to put up with.
So he's so annoyed at work he has to go beat shit up.
I don't even think he has to, but he's the only one who can do it. But he also sees that the real thing that he's doing, he's Superman. He's been all around the world. He's been to other planets. He's seen places that function and places that don't function. And he's like, the places that function, they have free presses. They have good government. They have people accountable to the government. He doesn't believe in kings. He doesn't believe in dictators. He's very much democracy and journalism guy. So I really think that this is how he is protecting the world by being a reporter. And it's the superhero stuff. He has to do it. He's the only one who can do it. He has a duty, but it's not his calling. The journalism is his true calling.
Like a kind of alternate world thing where Superman landed in North Korea.
Yeah, well, they've already done the Superman Red Sun. That's like a whole thing where he before he landed in the USSR, and becomes the communist Superman.
All right.
I really loved what they did in the movie this past summer, where they gave him a reason for saving everyone. And the motivation was, when you thought about it, pretty simple, but I hadn't seen it done in Superman before. Like, he goes around trying to save everyone because of all of what he's lost. And so he's doing it not so much out of heroism, but trying to, avoid having people damaged in the way he was, with losing his whole planet and family and everything like that. I thought that was very cool. And then
the Superman I grew up with, reading him in the 70s, he was practically a Janist then. I mean, he went out of his way not to kill anything. Whatever the monster was, he was going to capture it. If there were cockroaches in a building, he wasn't going to just use his heat vision to blast the cockroaches. He was going to relocate those cockroaches. I see we have a question about establishing tone for worlds.
Yes. Either one of you guys jump in.
So I definitely, I'm not sure what being too on the nose would indicate. So for me, for my Bitterwood universe, where it's our world, it's post-apocalyptic. It's dark and gritty. It is grim, and people suffer. I really kind of spend a lot of time, with people, having wounds that are getting infected and having limbs sawed off while they're trying to drink enough whiskey to bear the pain, and it's just part of the vibe that goes with this world. But then when I did Dragon Apocalypse, where it's more playful, jokey, I kind of build one absurdity on top of another, and the readers going to just have to go along with it, But I think I don't know that once you are there, I don't feel like you can be too on the nose. Once you pick the bit, you got to commit to it.
Yeah, I think one of the things you want to think about is like what's going to be the same and what's going to be different, and don't bite off too much that's different, or don't make it different just because you want more to be different. You should pick a thing that you want to focus on. That's the big cool difference you're going to explore, and then keep a lot of the rest of it the same, familiar to what people are used to. Like you can go all over the world and all through history, and you will find people doing the same kinds of things. That's why Chaucer and Shakespeare still work. They're falling in love, they're worried about money, they're having fun with their kids. They're I don't know, cheating on their spouse, or they're greedy, or like the family of sort of human motivations for stuff is relatively constant and familiar to all of us. And so if you're going to build a new world that, say, has this race of super knights, right? So the super knights are still going to be people, and they're still going to have motivations that are like people do. And so I think if you can keep stuff the same and familiar, then the world that you're building, whatever the cultural or climate or whatever differences are, then you'll give people a way in, and it won't just be some completely weird alien thing that they have to kind of grasp all at once. So I think that's part of like if you look at Tolkien, his little hobbits were like sort of villagers in Britain, right? They're worried about breakfast and smoking their pipes and that kind of thing. There was a lot that was the same, and then you had the Nazgul and all the other parts of it that are different and cool. But having that sort of path and familiarity, I think lets people start to relate to it.
That grounding.
Yeah.
I think also you have to in a world like what James said, right? You got this kind of post-apocalyptic weird world where everybody's trying to hold in their guts and everything. But you don't also want to make it all one note, right? Because there are going to be children kicking a ball around and laughing no matter how bad it is. There's going to be the tone of the world versus the tone of your character. I mean, if you're writing a grimdark story, your character might walk around with a cloud over his head all the time, and always be moody like Eeyore or whatever it is. But that doesn't mean the rest of the world has to be like that. And that might help you compare and contrast that character too by showing some of those other bits that are lively and colorful and street fairs and all that kind of thing. And to your Hobbit comment, Dave, hobbits are cats. Basically, because they sleep and they eat and then they sleep and then they have second breakfast and then they go back to sleep again. All they do is change position of where they do it. But that's all right. Anybody got any other questions?
They spend some of their time staring earnestly into the camera and talking about how brave they need to be.
Sleeping on your keyboard. Hey, you're
trying when I was doing my world for Lady Isovar, which was a total comedy story, I gave myself more latitude to have things be weird, because the whole thing is set up as this knight and her squire on a journey, and so they're going through a bunch of different places. And I made those places, I made a lot of them more funny and less practical because I was going for jokes. And I think given the tone of the book, that was a choice I was happy with. But you weren't going to find like Oscar-winning dramatic roles in the villains, or that kind of thing. So I think you also need to figure out what is the tone that fits the story the best.
Lady Isovar, by page 3, you realize you are reading something different, and you just kind of sit back and say, okay, I'm just going to go along for the ride with this and see what else happens, because I already know by the 3rd page that this is set up unlike all the other stuff that we've seen, right? This is going for a laugh, very obviously, and it's very obviously got some strangeness to it right away. So and I think that's kind of maybe what Lucas was getting at a little bit, is you set the tone for that really early in that story, so readers weren't kind of blindsided by it on chapter 3 or something, saying, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah,
right. You know right away. Yeah.
So, Ro, does that mean you've read Lady Isovar?
I have read some of it.
Okay.
And I didn't stop because I didn't like it. I don't have it here with me up in DC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I've started several books. Actually.
So I don't know how much longer we're going to be running, but the one thing I really wanted to say about world building, that if I have any wisdom to give people, is while it's important to be well read and to know your genre, and you're going to learn a lot more about world building by going out for a hike, or by getting on a kayak and going through a swamp. The best place to learn about building a world is to get out and experience our world and start thinking about how it came to be. You're gonna encounter stuff in the wild. I'm sure, Dave. I mean, if you're a geologist, you'll be out in the wild or out on a hike, and you'll just find a rock, and suddenly this rock is like unfolding eons of time, and telling huge stories. And I will go and I'll see some twisted tree, and it's like, this is there's like centuries of history standing before me. And one of the things that I don't mean to I know you were talking about the Jungle Planet. One of the things that I did a world building course once called The History of the World in 6 Slices, where I used pizza to show the complexity of the world, because I was pointing out, this is years ago, so if I can't remember everything now, like every continent but Antarctica contributes to a slice of pizza. The tomatoes, from the Americas, and spices from that originated in Asia, and cheeses, that the Europeans obviously played a big part of it, and the parts of Africa where some of these grains that originally became our breads come from. And so, to me, the worst world building is the Star Wars. Here's a planet and it's all ice. Here's a planet and it's all a desert. There's no variety. There's one culture. There's and it's just one note. World building, and I say that as if this has held back Star Wars in some way. Or Star Trek, that this lazy world building is going to make your work flop. But no, it really seems that people go into it. But study our world. Our world is just story after story. The smallest things that you can find will just the salt on your table. Once you start investigating this why there's a salt shaker on your table. It can unfold, all of human history and, wars and the buildings of empires. So, there's all this complexity in reality, and studying reality is where you're going to make the best rich fiction.
Yeah. If you can throw in details that are relatable to people, it's less important than the gravitational constant of your world relative to its mass, and more important that you can tell them what it smells like, when they're at the edge of a river, because that's the thing that's going to be more immediate.
I had someone say to me, I had written a scene about a lake, and I was talking about the herons and egrets and the swallows and flocks, and they were like, I just wish I could write nature, like this. How do you what do you do for research? And I'm like, I go out to lakes and I look around. I'm writing from experience. I go out and I see the herons and the egrets, and so when I need something to put in my landscape, I've got the buffer of the mind camera, of the stuff I've seen. So it sounds trite, but travel, it's easy to be an introvert, and think that you're learning everything you can from books or I don't want to knock anyone's writing journey, but I edit anthologies, and there's times I'll get a story and I'll be like, I feel like they have played a lot of video games, and they're taking their world building knowledge from games that they've played, and there's not, I'm not feeling this genuine spark with, there's no grass being touched at all.
Yep.
And so I do think that that good world building, you'll feel it. You'll feel that the author has some experience that he's building on, and he's not just parroting back, the cliches of the genre. Tolkien, people imitate him. But he wasn't, parroting back the cliches of the genre. He was deeply immersed in a lot of different lore, in language, and he put in a lot of study of things, of phenomena that are in the real world, in order to build this vast fictional world. So reality should always be your guide to the fantastic.
Yeah, and another thing I'd say to sort of piggyback on that is that you should not feel bad about finding people who know more than you do about stuff.
Yeah.
Because I've done that so many times. I have an astronomy professor who I first started sharing my books with when I was writing Daros. And I was like, I want to have this ship having a cloaking device because I think that's a cool, plot thing. And I was like, but I don't know how that should work. And I want to have some sort of science and not just have a cloak button that you push and then you're invisible. And so we actually talked about that, and I had put it in one way, and he was like, no, actually, if you make it more of a, a quantum state probability thing. And so I didn't end up writing the whole manual for how to build a cloaking device, but I had something that made him, a trained astrophysicist, be like, yeah, okay, that's bullshit, but it's okay.
You can see where they came from. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had, in one of my mysteries, I got in trouble. I had a character who wasn't a regular gun user, but had grown up around guns, and her husband had guns. And so I wrote her without knowing that culture very well. But I had a high school friend who hunts all the time. And I actually went to him and said, okay, here are some scenes where she's interacting with guns. And I had her, and I got most of the gun stuff right. I ended up watching a ton of YouTubes about, how to load things and all of that. But the thing he helped me with more than that was what would your view of this be like? Because I had her putting the safety on and off all the time, and worrying about whether it was loaded or not. And he's like, she would do those things, but she would be chill about it, and she wouldn't always need to know, whether the safety was on or off, and she wouldn't obsess about it like you're having her do that. And so that was actually super helpful, because that was a world I am not in. I can tell you how, plate tectonics works and what a subduction zone is like, but I don't know what a, Desert Eagle does to your hand when you fire it or anything like that. And so finding somebody who could help me with that and who would call bullshit on the things that I'm doing wrong is really, really helpful in the editing process, to kind of get you out of that. The people who wrote The Core, that movie with Samuel L. Jackson, did not do any of that.
No.
Yeah. When they stopped the ship and got out in the middle of the mantle, I was like, what? No.
So,
anyway.
Dave, I was going to say much the same thing. Like the book I'm writing now, they go to Area 51. And I've been to Las Vegas once for a couple of days, but it was Las Vegas and not really the desert. And I can't really go to the desert here in Virginia. But I know people who live in Arizona. So I'm like, hey, what are, like they always shake out your shoes and make sure the scorpions, if they're there, that, just little things like that, why would a Virginian know this? So one, you got the internet. 2, you have Google Maps. And 3, you have all these people watch our show. We talk to people from virtually every state. You can always and tell me the author who doesn't want to go, oh, wait, you want to know more about something I know something about? Who's going to say no? Did you guys ponder whether you want to be on this show? You're like, sure, I'll come on and talk. So yeah, there's really no excuse to do The Core, and let's get out in the mantle.
It's one of the things I like about the John Wick movies. Actually, is that he reloads, and he actually reloads when he still has like several rounds left.
Yeah.
If you sit there and watch him, he's like 1, 2, 3. It gets to like 8 and drops it. It's like, well, you got another like 5 or 6 rounds in there. But it kind of makes sense because he doesn't know what he's going to run into, and he doesn't want to have to be reloading in the middle of. And he also double taps, which is really nice. Yeah. So 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. Move on. Anybody got anything else? We got time for like maybe one more question if anybody has something. EL, you've been suspiciously quiet. EL's had a problem with his KDP got taken down, and he's having the big Amazon fight right now, trying to find a human being to talk to.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's a nightmarish. Although I will say that you have a better shot with Amazon responding than with anyone else. I feel like Ingram's service has just vanished.
James, 55 minutes ago, you said something I wanted to come back to real quick.
Yeah.
You said your first book, you had it published for a few years with somebody, then you got the rights back. How did you do that?
I said, hey, I'd like my rights back. So the first book ever published had a very vague reversion clause in it because I didn't have an agent. And so it was like the rights revert to me 7 years after the book went out of print, which was an absurdly long reversion time. And so one of the things that my agent did was the rights can revert after 2 years. That if I just request them back after 2 years, that the rights can revert. They don't automatically revert. I have to make a request, and then there's like a 6 months grace period or something. So the publisher was fine with that because most paperback books, 2 years, 90% of the paperbacks ever published aren't around in 2 years. The paperback novels have a lifespan of that rivals Lab Rats, and so you might get lucky and something will stick around. Bitterwood happened to stick around, but if Bitterwood is selling, then there's no reason to ask for your rights back because you're now you've earned out and you're getting you're getting royalties. But I signed this contract in 2005, and the other thing that having an agent did was they were asking for ebook rights. And in 2005, this publisher didn't publish ebooks. Hardly anybody was publishing ebooks. And so my agent's like, why are you getting the ebook rights? You don't have an ebook program. And I'm like, yeah, but eventually we're going to develop one. And he says, well, when you develop one, come back to us and we'll talk to you about it. And so I guess it was like 2009, they came back to me and said, hey, we need you to sign this writer that we can now convert your novel into an ebook because, and we'll pay you a 25% royalty on the wholesale price, and so at the time the model was they would sell a license to the ebook publisher for like half of what it would be. So it's effectively a 12% royalty, which compared to paperbacks, a 7% royalty was amazing. Except Amazon at the very same time had said, if you self-publish your ebooks with us, we pay 70% royalties, and 70% was a larger number than 12%. I'm a literary minded. Math isn't my first love, but I was like, I don't know, one of these numbers is bigger. And so they were basically saying that I had the rights to publish this ebook, because they were asking me to sign this contract, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm going to go ahead and publish the ebooks myself, and suddenly I was paying my mortgage with that. And so they later were like, hey, we'd like to put together an omnibus edition, and if I had signed over the omnibus, then they would have, of course, included an ebook right clause in that, and I would not have had I would have lost those rights. And so that's why in 2014 I decided that I'm leaving behind traditional publishing and going all in onto the self-publishing. So to get your rights back, just make sure when you sign a contract you've got a reversion clause that gives them a reasonable amount of time to make some money off your writing, but gives you the right to say, yep, I'm done with this, give me the rights back, and let me make more money.
Nice. All right. So when are your next books coming out? Or when did the latest ones come out, I guess?
My most recent was a mystery, Unwelcome Matt, about a librarian who's trying to kick out her deadbeat housemate, but comes home to find a dead body on her couch that's not the housemate. So that's that one, came out in August. I've got the romance novel in the works, and I'm working hard on my next sci-fi one, which is about it's set in the same universe as the others, which is a kind of a fraction of humanity left over after a big war, and they live out on the fringes of what used to be the human empire. And so this book has them kind of flying back into the middle of what used to be human-controlled space to try to figure out what happened, because they only survived because their jump gates got cut off. And so now their patrol has decided we're going to go back and explore and see what's left of the rest of humanity, if there's anything back there. So that's that one. Hoping to have that one out early next year.
Sounds like fun.
All right. So my latest releases are Map of the Drowned City. This is a collection of 30 of my short stories. It is only available in hardcover. It is dark, weird, funny. I'm an award-winning author. I've had stories in here reprinted in the year's best hard science fiction, the year's best science fiction and fantasy. I've won a Phobos Award for stories. I've been nominated for stuff I never won, but for the most part, I'm to toot my own horn here. Whenever I go into such a short fiction, I can really knock it out of the park again and again. So this is 30 of the best things that I've written to date. And then I've also released my first book ever under a pen name, and so the light in here is terrible. You can't see the. I've created a book with disappearing ink. Apparently, you can't see it, but this is called Sodom. And it's published under the pen name XJ May because I have some kid-friendly books that actually sell fairly decently on Amazon, stuff like Paradoxical Pets. And this is a my filthy pitch is Angels and Anal. It is a very spicy retelling of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah from the point of view of the two angels that arrive in the city that evening, and very adult. And so I didn't want.
You file that under religious as well?
Huh?
Do you file that under religious as well?
Based, yeah.
I grew up fundamentalist, so I've got a ton of Bible lore inside of me, and there were in the Bible specifically it says that the angels arrive in the city in the evening, and then it specifically says that the city is destroyed by flame in the morning. And so there's like a 10-hour gap in the story. And so I was like, oh, there's, I should fill in these gaps. And this is a book where a lot of gaps get filled in. Just one gap after another. I also, and then this is the final thing. I have built a career of writing books about violence. For better or worse, if I mentioned, I made a joke before this started, that for me, the epic fantasy was, there's the world building, but mainly I'm here for the stabbing, I want the fight scenes. And so both Bitterwood and Dragon Apocalypse and all my superhero novels are basically built to move the plot from one fight scene, plot, next fight scene, so my beats throughout the story are the big battles. Every climax, is 20 people and dragons and in free for alls. That's just the way that my mind works. And so Angels of Sodom, I was like, I want to write something where instead of the fight scenes, it's sex scenes that are my beats. And it turns out there's a lot of similarities between writing a great fight scene and a great sex scene.
How about that?
They both involve, just very careful pacing. You have to draw out something that is happening, very quickly, but describe it, make it feel like it's lasting a long time.
You hear that, Mike? Your next chapter 18? You taking notes?
No, never, ever again.
All right. Last call for questions. Anybody got anything? We're sitting at about an hour 10, which is fine.
And we have
too long. I've been here about 7 years is the Amazon standard, and I'm not sure.
I know for like audiobooks, if you go exclusive with audiobooks, you're signing a 7-year deal.
7 years for ACX, for ebooks, I think, if you sign with them, if you do the Kindle Select, you're exclusive for like a 90-day period. But you can
it's for 3 months.
Okay.
Well, the penalty for backing out is just that you get out of it. I mean, they'll kick you out. It's not. Yeah, I don't know how much of it is contractual.
Michael, what do we got next?
Well, hold on. EL has come up with a question, which I was worried, frankly, for him when he hadn't peppered us with 16 questions.
I know, we're going to send the EMTs out.
Short answer. Do you build worlds and put characters in them, or build characters and give them a world? Which one do you start with for your stories?
For me, it's always the characters, but I am a total pantser, which means that I'm writing the scenes without totally knowing everything about the world, and the world gets filled in as I go. I know it makes Mike cringe there, but I always start with the people and put them in a place, and the world expands from that first place that they inhabit and sort of builds out. And of course, I go through editing and make it all more consistent and real afterwards, but the starting point is always the characters that the story's about.
Yeah. So, and for me, it's very reciprocal, so I will have the character, but then I start thinking about the backstory, and that is where, the world building starts coming in. So in Dragon Apocalypse, I've got the main narrator is named Stagger, and I had him with this one personality, and this required that he be, being raised by monks in a monastery, and so coming from that, I was writing his father's backstory, and then it's like, well, his father was this way because of the grandfather, and then I had the great grandfather, and so I had like 4 generations, and I was building the world history, the commerce, and the religion as I'm doing this, in order just to have a reason that this very educated, scholarly guy is running around in the jungle, stealing idols from vine draped temples, and then drinking himself into a stupor. Anytime he's got coins in his pocket, and so this is I getting this character and understanding him wound up building helping me build the world, and then the more I build the world, the more characters arrive to populate it. So.
Yeah. And I would say for my first book, I just chose England as my, I was like, this is my map, England. Because I was like, you know what, I'm just trying to write a story here. I don't want to worry about the world. I want something that I know exists, and I can, go to Google Maps and look, and how far are these 2 places apart, and what have you. And the Proxima thing is the first time where it's like, you know what, this is all made up in my head instead of, my Haley Traveler takes place on Mars, and they have Google Mars, so I can literally go and look at different places and assign significance to them. But yeah, this is the first time where I feel like, you know what, I'm going to do both. I'm going to invent characters and the world. Although the characters are based on my dog, so I'm really not inventing characters. I'm just.
So you're telling me the Mars rovers have all those little cameras on it, and we can do like street view for 30 feet or something on Mars?
No, but you can look at it from satellites.
Yeah.
Street
I
view.
was I just finished becoming a druid, and I thought you're less the kind of landscape, although that was pretty vivid, but just the culture and the fact that there were people doing jobs and living lives. Like everywhere he went, he ran into people who were doing what you would do in that century, and that just seemed very real to me. So I think that your process worked for that. Anyway, I enjoyed reading.
Ah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Sometimes the mundane it actually helps in fantasy books, because it always gets left out. It's always some damn prince or something, and people in the castle. It's
yeah. Like James said before, you need the grounding, and there's always going to be people who have to clean, the drudges or what have you. Or the blacksmith in my world. Somebody has to make the metal implements.
Yeah.
So. And just having that common thing, and then people can at least, okay, I can understand this. Like Dave said, you can't everyone be a weasel manufacturer, and you have, what is that, and you have no comprehension. Then you're just
right.
Like, this is a fever dream.
Ooh, we must be king. How can you tell?
One of my characters in Dragon Apocalypse is a cross-dressing dwarf, and another character asks, where does he keep getting these outfits? And so because I had the character ask that question, I was like, oh wait, no, I've got now this whole thing about how he has this tailor, and her name is Rose 13 because she's on the 13th husband, and she's but she's, everyone knows she's a murderer. That she murders her husbands as soon as she gets tired of them. But on the other hand, she's the only competent tailor in the city, this city of pirates. So they're like, we'll put up with her. She's good company. She's fun in the bar.
I'm just picturing a miniature Klinger now.
Yeah. He's I think what's funny is that the world changed so much. I feel like now I felt like when I wrote this, I didn't go into any of the politics or anything. He's an interesting character, and I wasn't trying to, he's partially there for as a comedic foil, but he's also, uh, he's also there. He's got a character arc about, becoming comfortable. He's kind of, he has a secret that he's hiding, and then by the end, he's not hiding it anymore. And today, I feel like, it'd be like, oh, there's, he's trying to make some political statement where he's woke, or I go too far the other way. He's like, well, he's making fun of transgender people, and but the characters arrive, and they're just who they are. And you just gotta respect them and write them with as much affection as you can.
Yeah, I ran into something like that too. I write about cops basically in my Inquisitors Guild series. My characters are detectives in this kind of medieval detective branch of the government, and I had the first book come out in 2019, and then there was the horrible murder in Minnesota and all that other kind of stuff. And I started looking at my scenes and thinking about their attitude and how that, it had seemed like they were basically just good guys before, but they were saying some things that looked worse after the context of the summer and the riots and all of that kind of thing. And so I actually went back and revised. I was doing the audiobook at that time, and it was really hearing the scene read out loud that maybe like, oh yeah, that was even that short a time period, the world had kind of shifted. And it wasn't like it was super offensive before, but it had become offensive after. Not offensive, but uncomfortable. I don't know how to say it, but anyway. So, and that's the cool thing about publishing ebooks and doing the print-on-demand paperbacks, is that I changed that one weekend, and no one ever is going to see the earlier version and have that uncomfortable feeling unless they find one of my paperbacks in a bargain bin or something. Yeah, but it is interesting how even in the course of like your writing career or a human life, or even 5 or 6 years, things shift in terms of what the emphasis is. And your dwarf is another example of that too. And even Klinger looks totally different now than he did back when MASH was coming out.
Yeah.
So for people under 30, Klinger was a character.
Oh yeah, MASH is very hard to watch from a Me Too perspective now. I tried to show it to our kids, and I was like, oh, we love this show. It was really funny. And we're watching it like, oh, none of these jokes land anymore. This is, very squirm-inducing. So yeah, it is weird how the culture changes.
Yeah. And it was, it was one of these things where it was a problem I had, that I just had a quick solution to it that was kind of a joke. And then it's like, oh wait, but now I have established this backstory for this character, this trait for this character. And then it wound up, becoming this whole long saga with him having this huge backstory. But the heroine of the book, basically, when she arrives at his house, I'd already established he was, of course, I could have said he was married or something, but she's basically had her clothes destroyed in a latest fight, and he has some women's clothing around, and they're kind of like, why does he have women's clothing around? And so there was like just a little implication there, and then there's so much more I can't say without it being spoilery, but I just had this giant thread of a backstory about how his father had been into perfection, and when he was born a dwarf, he basically told the midwife, make this go away. He's assumed that the baby's been killed, but instead it's been sold to a circus. And so now there's this whole plot of his brother looking for him, and so once it's interesting, just this little need to like, well, I need to get her some fresh clothing, and then it's like, oh well, this is here's a cross dresser, and then it's like, oh, so or let's talk about his backstory of why he's here, and just this giant again the world building that goes into just from the simplest little lines. Just let your imagination go wild.
Yep.
And I think the cross-dressing dwarf is a good place to pause there, Michael.
Yes, I was going to say, Dave, where can we find your stuff, and how often do you perform at the Idiot Box?
I'm there at least a few times a month. So if you're in the Greensboro area and want to see some improv, check out idiotbox.com, I think. My books are all at davedobsonbooks.com, and my games are planktongames.com. And love to have you check either of those out. And I'm on all the socials and stuff too.
And James, we will be together for Steel City Con here in a couple weeks.
Yes, just a couple of weeks away. It's approaching fast, and I'm pretty excited about it. Hoping it doesn't snow this year.
Yeah,
I wouldn't bet on it.
Haven't checked the schedule to see if Pittsburgh's playing at 1:00 on the Sunday again, like last year.
Yeah, we had
Pittsburgh.
Some bad luck last year, and yet I think you still had a pretty good year.
I
think the Comic-Con crowd is probably not the go to NFL games crowd.
I think there's the NFL is a big. There's a lot of overlap.
There's some. I understand
Pittsburgh.
I get it.
If you do something in a town that has a home game, or if they're competitive for the Super Bowl, I did a show in New Orleans, and the Saints were playing a home game, and if they won that home game, they were like advancing on to either the Super Bowl or the game before the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's the year the Patriots beat them.
Yeah, and
or the Buccaneers, one of the two.
And that Sunday, I was like, well, certainly these nerds aren't going to watch, be all that concerned about the game, and it's like, nope. It's the pregame for New Orleans, in New Orleans started like at 11 a.m. and it was like everybody, the vendors at the show had little TVs that they were sitting around. They're watching on their tablets and stuff.
I mean, the whole thing that defines nerds is being passionate about stuff. So I don't think we should be surprised that they can be passionate about a lot of different things.
More than one thing. Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough.
And if you live in a town that has a sports team, if that sports team is doing well, even you get swept up in it. It's hard to be curmudgeonly.
I live in Blacksburg, and despite the fact that the Hokies are horrible this year, I also have a daughter going to school there, and they start pre-gaming for on game day at like 7, 8 o'clock. You'll see kids out playing beer pong, at 7, 8 in the morning. Right. I mean, they start early, and people arrive from all over the day or two before with just these tremendous campers and things that they only use 6 times a year. It's crazy. Michael, what are we doing on Thursday? 8 o'clock.
Thursday, we're going to be in a book sale with several other authors, and they said, hey, why don't we have a show about it? And I said, well, I'm a lazy scheduler, so sure. So Tyler Kirk, I shouldn't have started naming names because I will forget, Timothy Robert and Brian Holhauser will be joining us to talk about random stuff because that's our whole gig.
And we each have at least one book that's going to be on some kind of sale over the weekend, right?
Yes.
Okay.
21st to 24th.
So you'll get to watch Mike try to peddle his book again.
Hey, I did not show the Proxima Station once today. I mean, it's right there.
All right.
But,
Dave, James, thanks you very much for showing up. For the people who are,
I love talking to you guys.
For the folks who are just showing up late to this, thank you for showing up, and feel free to go back and watch and give it a like and hit the subscribe button if you haven't. And
it may bankrupt you if you buy all of James's and Dave's books, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it.
All right.
And only thing left to do is to wave awkwardly.